Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast, sponsored by Lone Oak Coffee. Visit loneoakcoffee.com, use promo code COFFEE2020 for a discount. And by Dizzy Pig Barbecue. Visit dizzypigbarbecue.com, use the coupon KEIM15, that's KEIM 15, for 15% off your order in the U.S. Today, I'm joined by my ESPN Rams colleague Lindsey Thiry for some excellent insight into the Rams. Learn about Washington's next opponent, get some fantasy football insight as well. And I also talked to former NFL scout Tyler Roman for his fantasy football tips. He names a bunch of sleepers, folks, provides insight into what to look for in this matchup when it comes to fantasy football. Yes, we talk a little Washington too. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I have a story up now about Washington coach Ron Rivera and why some say he's the perfect man for this situation in Washington. You can follow Lindsey on Twitter at Lindsey Thiry, LINDSEY THIRY. You can follow Tyler on Twitter at NFL Scout 21. And now, here's my conversation with ESPN's Lindsey Thiry. Well, Lindsey, thank you for joining me. One thing I want to start with, this is the Rams' third trip to the East Coast. What kind of toll do you think that takes? And do you think it even played a factor going back-to-back weeks to the East Coast and then the game they played against the Giants last week?
Yeah, you know what? Sean McVay has done a really terrific job since he arrived in LA, getting his team prepared to play those East Coast games, especially when it's kind of that 10 a.m. body clock kickoff. They did start really slow against the Bills. It's hard to tell if that was just a function of them having to go back-to-back East Coast trips or just kind of they weren't ready necessarily for what the Bills were going to throw out them. The Bills obviously were the best team they've played this season. Going into this last week, though, against the Giants, I think that those back-to-back East Coast trips really did play a toll on them. That combined with, you come off a really emotional win, or excuse me, I'm still calling it a win.
Felt like one for a while.
25-point comeback. It felt like one. Yeah, it was a loss. They did indeed lose. So you come off an emotional loss to the Bills, and then you look ahead and it's the Giants who are really, really struggling. So I don't think that the Rams, it was surprising in the sense that it was atypical for a Sean McVay team to have a letdown kind of like that. But I don't think it was necessarily super surprising that the Rams kind of sleepwalked, I should say, through that Giants win. So going into Washington, I think, maybe this was kind of a wake-up call against the Giants, like, hey, we can't take any team for granted. We have a long travel schedule, but, they know that they can't drop these games that they really should be winning.
Was there something else that the Giants did well? Because defensively, I was shocked at how well they played them. What did they do defensively that maybe gave them some problems?
Yeah, they were really able to stop the run. Darrell Henderson had been really effective out of the backfield the last two games for the Rams. And then suddenly, Sean McVay couldn't find a way to get Darrell going. He swapped him out for Malcolm Brown at one point, said Darrell kind of took a pretty big hit. Malcolm Brown really couldn't get going. And as we know with the Rams, their offense kind of goes the way of the run. Everything obviously based on that, on play action. So the entire offense, with the exception of a few plays, just kind of looked a bit out of whack. And again, it just didn't seem like the same offense that we had seen in the previous three games, which Jared Goff's been pretty efficient in conducting this offense. And Sean, who obviously stuck by 11 personnel for the first few years he was here, he's really been mixing it up and getting more guys involved, but they really just couldn't get anything going, any kind of rhythm against the
How much
Giants.
does Cam Akers coming back change things?
I'm not sure how much it changes things because Cam now, obviously he's a rookie. He started those first two games, but week 2, he was only in there for the opening series before he got hurt. So I think this is going to be really interesting to see how much Darrell Henderson proved in that time, right? Because Darrell's a guy who was injured for the Rams a little bit last year, and he was injured a bit during training camp. So I think the jury was kind of still out, how effective is this guy really going to be in the NFL? And going back to week 2 and 3, he was incredibly effective. So I'd be a little bit curious to see if Cam Akers gets that starting job back, or if Darrell Henderson proved enough that that's going to continue to be his job. I think regardless, it's still going to be a running back committee. But, there's got to be somebody who takes
What
the
have
first
you
snap.
seen from Akers and Henderson? The little time you saw Akers, what did you see from him, and then also along with that, what made Henderson effective a couple weeks ago, especially?
Yeah, Akers started that week 1 game. He didn't really pop. I mean, he has the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. I think he's strong between the tackles. But so far, it's just kind of like, all right, this looks like a rookie running back, right? And not like a rookie as in Todd Gurley rookie, but a rookie as in like a second round pick who's just still kind of trying to figure out exactly, how to play in the NFL. I mean, that being said, I think he looked promising, but it wasn't anything that really made you say, wow. Darrell Henderson, I think he's had several wow moments. And you've kind of seen his burst, especially outside the tackles, catching the ball out of the backfield. He's pretty small in stature, but I mean, he can just really take off. I mean, his burst of speed is impressive. So I think the Rams really do kind of have this complementary set of running backs that each have the ability to do a little bit of everything, but then again, they all have their own
said
style.
That Sean was getting a lot more people involved, and knowing Sean, the way covering him here, I'm sure after last year, he probably started looking at things right away the day after the season. So how much do you think of what they're doing this year as a result of maybe things not going the way they wanted it to last year?
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, Sean kind of tries to play it close to the vest as far as how much, losing in a few things can drive him nuts. But without a question, the way this offense came out, and you see some of these play designs, it's like, all right, I know what Sean McVay was doing during quarantine. I mean, beyond drinking rosé, he was definitely sitting there designing some stuff for this offense. I mean, we saw Gerald Everett go in on a sweep the other day, like walked in for a 2-yard touchdown, and he's their number 2 tight end. So you're like, okay, Sean definitely was, dreaming this up at some point. But again, like it used to be all 11 personnel, everything looked the same, and now we're seeing 4 receivers, not on the field, but like 4 different receivers are in the rotation. We're seeing 2 different tight ends in the rotation, 3 running backs. Where the first couple seasons Sean was here, it was kind of like he had his starting 12 or starting 11, and that is who you saw on the field snapping.
And then you talked about Jared Goff too being more efficient. Is that a byproduct of that, or is there something else that's going on with him?
Yeah, I think that the offensive line is doing a much better job this year. Last season, they had a lot of injuries. They had to put some rookies into starting positions. So they really weren't able to kind of get continuity or experience. And now I think we're seeing kind of that experience that some of those guys got last year pay off. They did lose their left guard. He's on injured reserve, but David Edwards had to take over, and he's one of those guys who was thrown into the fire last year as a rookie. So I think the offensive line's really kind of been able to provide Jared more protection. And I think Jared himself just looks more efficient. He spent a lot of time this offseason working on his footwork, just trying to be a little bit more mobile, a little bit more agile. And I think we're definitely seeing
Has Kevin O'Connell, has there been much of an influence there with him? Or is it kind of hard to tell at this point?
It's really kind of hard to tell. I mean, Jared definitely has benefited from Kevin O'Connell. I think it'd be naive to say otherwise, seeing as Kevin really is, I mean, he's the offensive coordinator, but he's really dedicated there at practice almost at all times to Jared. But it's always a little bit hazy, right? To see exactly what's the Sean McVay effect, what's the Kevin O'Connell effect when it comes to the quarterback, just because obviously as much as Sean wants to kind of step back and have a bigger view of the team, he's always a little bit in there. But I think Kevin's definitely had an effect. And Jared's mentioned how great it is to have a quarterbacks coach who's also played the position. So there's a really good understanding.
And defensively, really good pass rush, obviously more than Aaron Donald. Is the pass rush about what you expected, or is it a little bit better than you thought it might be?
It's been about what I expected. The Giants game, I think, is a bit of an outlier, how much they were able to get to Daniel Jones. It was hard to know what this pass rush was going to be going into the season, because they did lose Dante Fowler. They did lose Clay Matthews. But then again, anytime you're on a front that includes Aaron Donald, I mean, somebody's going to be free to get to the quarterback, because Aaron Donald is very, very rarely left one-on-one. So I think they've been able to recently get more consistent pressure, but it's been about what I've expected.
And that, are they better defensively this year, you think?
I think the jury's still out on that. Brandon Staley's their first-year defensive coordinator, and at times they've looked really, really good. At times, the secondary has looked a bit confused. I mean, there's a lot of nickel defense. A lot of times, majority of the time, I should say, they have 5 defensive backs out there. Against Buffalo, there were times, and this is actually, John, one of those really crazy things when you're covering a game on TV now. You don't get that press box view, right? So you're not sitting there before the whistle looking at the chaos and seeing like, oh gosh, those guys aren't lined up. Those guys are still yelling at each other. They don't know where they're going. But kind of going back and looking at it, it just looks like sometimes they're not. The communication needs to be better, and they need to be in position a little bit quicker than they are as the ball's being snapped. But I think this defense has the potential to be really, really good. It's just a matter of kind of working out these kinks and figuring out sometimes maybe what coverages they want to be in. And sometimes it looks like
last
a little
one, Lindsey,
bit
and I want to go to the fighter, Jalen Ramsey, and I'm assuming there won't be any fisticuffs this weekend with he and Terry McLaurin. Do you expect him to cover Terry and play off that too? What kind of year has he been having?
Yeah, Jalen he's such an interesting player to watch. I mean, he's having by all means like a pretty good season because at the end of the day, quarterbacks just don't go at him. The Eagles targeted him twice. The Bills targeted him only a couple times. I mean, one of those, they beat him for a touchdown in which, no one's harder on himself than Jalen is just because he knows he only gets a couple of opportunities a game. And so if he doesn't capitalize on one of those or, by not even capitalizing, we mean allows a touchdown, he's pretty hard on himself. But he just continues to be such an interesting cornerback to cover because he truly is that lockdown cornerback where a lot of quarterbacks just will not go at him. And this last week, they had him lining up even in the slot a bit, covering the Giants tight end. So Brandon Staley is trying to kind of move him around and put him in more positions to make plays just because, he's effective locking down the side of the field. But I think that Jalen even is maybe itching to do more than just lock down. Like he wants to get that ball. He wants to make a play on the ball. So the Rams are trying to kind of move him around a bit this year to see if they can
That's
help
the curse of being
happen.
as good as he is. So which is what Dion faced back in the day and all that. Lindsey, I appreciate your time. Great insight. And sorry we're not going to see each other this weekend, but it was good talking to you. After this break, I'll be back with former NFL scout Tyler Roman for some fantasy football insight and his thoughts on Washington running back Antonio Gibson.
Is there anything more craveable than the smell of McDonald's fries? If someone's hiding an order of fries, they're never hiding it well. It takes one whiff to trigger a fry craving that will only be satisfied the McDonald's way. So stand up if you would like to taste the smell of a McDonald's fry right now. Did you just stand? Because if you did, then you earned yourself a trip to the McDonald's drive-thru for your own steamy carton of crispy, golden goodness. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
I used to love making all of my own spices. Now I love reaching for one of Dizzy Pig's craft seasonings. Based in Manassas, Virginia, they grind their spice combinations daily, and it's easy to see why they've built a loyal following over the past 20 years. Dizzy Pig owner Chris Capel has won 15 championships on the Pro Barbecue Tour using only their products. And I've heard from other pitmasters on the barbecue tour that insist on Dizzy Pig. If it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. Just recently, I cooked a ribeye with their cow lick seasoning. Fantastic flavor. My wife really likes the mole and the Peruvian, and their popular Dizzy Dust is truly all-purpose. And if you're cooking turkey during the holidays, you have to use their Mad Max turkey rub. It's seasonal, so you can buy it now until January. With 27 different blends, there is a seasoning for just about any recipe or cooking technique. Get 15% off your online order shipped in the U.S. if you use the coupon KEIM15, that's K-E-I-M 15, at dizzypigbarbecue.com. That's DIZZYPIGBBQ.com. Welcome back. Now here's my conversation with Tyler Roman. Well, Tyler, I appreciate you joining me. As always enjoy your insight. And I want to talk to you about some fantasy football. But I want to start with the guy on Washington, Antonio Gibson. What's your take on him, especially from a fantasy perspective, as we kind of move forward in this season?
Yeah, Antonio Gibson, he's a player. He's a player, man. I really like I like what the team has in him. He had his best game of the year last Sunday, had a season high in touches at 17 and total yards of 128. So I think his role is only going to get bigger going forward. I think J.D. McKissic still outsnapped him. But, I mean, I think Antonio is a lead back. He's great out of the backfield, as we saw. They threw a lot of screens to him. So I really think he's going to be a feature point of this offense, especially if they need to see what the playmakers are for this team going forward. And I think this next 12 games or so is a great chance to evaluate him and other players going forward.
Have you seen the way he's being used evolve, change, that tells you, and especially even as a back, because as a back, there's still some things he's working through, but have you seen some things in his game that are evolving that say he's ready for not just more touches, but bigger plays?
Yeah, I think he's hitting the hole a little harder. I think it's good. I mean, obviously he's not as experienced as a runner. I think it's pretty evident that he still runs a little too high. That's why he's got, jacked up a little bit on a few runs going forward. He definitely has speed. He's not getting caught from behind. So I think really I like the way they're using him. I like the little wide receiver screens they've had on him recently. So I think, this team needs to get the ball in the hands of their playmakers, as few as they have, but Antonio's right up there. So I like the way Scott Turner's using him. He's evolving him any way he can get him the ball. Like I said, screens out of the backfield. So I really do like what the plan is for him as the season progresses.
How about for Dwayne Haskins? What have you seen so far in him?
Well, Dwayne obviously had a poor performance 2 weeks ago against Cleveland. He played a lot better on Sunday, but I think it's hard to evaluate him going forward just with how poor of his weapons around him, and the offensive line is obviously not the greatest. They played better last week, but I think with him, I think he's getting his stats were fine on Sunday. They were. But the thing with him is you can tell he was playing scared because he knew, if he threw a pick or has a negative play, he could be getting benched based off all the, things we're hearing from the outside reports and stuff. So I think he's playing a little tentative, at least on Sunday. And, I think his confidence, I think, maybe taking a step back just because, like I said, it's hard to, lay it all out there when you think that any, mess up you have can get you pulled. Especially, obviously that 4th and goal from 11, he got to put that ball into the end zone. But I think he was just scared of making a mistake, so he just dumped it down to Isaiah Wright. So, I think the team needs to let him play. I know there's going to be some negative aspects of what we're seeing right now, but I think they got to see what they have in them, and I think they got to stick with them for as long as possible, honestly.
Okay, cool. Now let's move ahead to some fantasy sleepers that you see throughout the league. Who are a few guys that have jumped out in that regard?
I think a guy that I like is Justin Herbert, the quarterback from the Chargers, rookie. He had a really nice game last Sunday against the Bucs, and there's some buys coming up as we get later in the season. I think Aaron Rodgers is on a bye this week, Stafford. So if you can pick up Justin Herbert as a guy to go forward, he had 29 points against Tampa Bay in a standard Yahoo scoring league, and they played the Saints on Monday, and they have not allowed less than 20 points to opposing quarterbacks. So I think it's a good matchup for this Sunday for sure. Another guy would be, I think it would be Joshua Kelly from the Chargers. He's going to get a lot more carries with Austin Eckler out. He looks like he's going to be the main guy going forward, but he's also going to split times, like I said, with Justin Jackson. And then, another guy I think would be Scotty Miller, the receiver for Tampa Bay. He, with Chris Godwin out and now O.J. Howard going out with a torn Achilles, Scotty Miller has had 83 yards actually the last 2 weeks, 24 points over that time frame. So I think he's going to be a guy that Brady's going to look at in the middle of the field and gobble up some targets and probably get some touchdowns here and there. And then lastly, a guy that blew up last night with the Packers, Robert Tonyan, 3 TDs. And that's a guy I think guys need to pick up now. He has 5 touchdowns the last 3 games. He's going to be the number 1 tight end going forward. And you have Rodgers as your quarterback, you're definitely going to excel.
And just for everybody listening, that was Bram's cell phone calling me in the middle of Tyler's answer. So Bram kind of inserting himself into the show just by his phone call. So I apologize for that. So when you look at Washington's matchup with the Rams from a fantasy perspective, who are some of the guys that you're looking at on both sides?
Well, with Washington, we talked about earlier with Antonio, I would start Antonio. And I think, he's going to get some carries. He's going to get touches out of the backfield, whether it be through the air, through the ground. So I think Antonio gets a solid RB2 going into this week. the other, main weapon Washington has will be Terry McLaurin. And I think he's going to put up some solid numbers because I think they're going to be behind this game. Might be some garbage numbers, but you definitely have to maybe start him with a grain of salt, knowing that Jalen Ramsey most likely will going to be shadowing him the whole game. But like I said, he might get some numbers toward the end of the game. And on the Rams' perspective, the middle of the field, I think, is going to be where they're going to eat between Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. I think the Rams are probably going to do pretty well offensively. Running back-wise, it's kind of a committee right now. Cam Akers has been hurt, so he probably won't play this week. Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown. So it's kind of a pick your poison for the Rams of running back perspective, just because you don't know who's going to get most of the carries. I would probably say Darrell Henderson, at least for this week, though.
But you're looking at that middle of the field because that's where Washington has been vulnerable throughout the year, that middle of the field. And that seems to be a strength of the Rams.
For sure. I mean, that's McVay, obviously. Washington fans know from experience he definitely knows how to call an offense and attack vulnerabilities, and I think he's going to do pretty well on Sunday with Cooper and Robert Woods, and even Tyler Higbee at the tight end position as well.
Tyler, I appreciate you the insight, some good fantasy talk there, so I hope people are paying attention. Appreciate you joining me.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Support for this podcast comes from today's military. You have a calling, we have an answer.
You want to have meaning in whatever you do, from improving your community to making the world a better place. You can find that fulfillment in today's military. You have a calling. We have an answer. Learn more at todaysmilitary.com.
You've heard me talking about Lone Oak Coffee for a couple months now. Let me tell you a little bit about who they are and what they're about. Lone Oak Coffee is based in the Shenandoah Valley, just a nice bunch of people who are open for business during this trying time. Just look at their website, loneoakcoffee.com, and what do they highlight? Their core values of quality, family, transparency. They work with co-op farmers from all over the world to source their beans. They also support small farmers to find the right beans. During this pandemic, one of my saving graces has been grinding my beans from Lone Oak Coffee and taking a few minutes before the day to savor the coffee, get my mind right. Put a little jazz or Frank Sinatra or Louis Armstrong on in the background, it's even better. I've enjoyed all their blends, but among my favorites, the Ethiopian Guji, love the berry flavor, the Mexican Chiapas, and their house blend. Start your day off right with Lone Oak Coffee. Visit loneoakcoffee.com, that's LONEOAK coffee.com. Use promo code COFFEE2020 for a discount. You can thank me later. That's it for this episode. Thanks to Lindsey and Tyler for joining me, and thanks to Lone Oak Coffee and Dizzy Pig for their continued support. And thank you for listening. I'll be back with another one on Thursday, another Therapy Thursday session. Talk to you next time.